Hello, you are listening to Screen Tones, a webcomic podcast. Today is our second pilot episode where we talk about mediums and how we use our medium for our comic. We have two new guests, Delphina and Claire this time, so please stick around.
Don't let your dreams be dreams. Yesterday said tomorrow. So just do it. Make your dreams come true.
Oh no. Okay. Awesome. Welcome to Screen Tones, a webcomic podcast. I am Krispy, and I use she, they pronouns. I work on the webcomic Ghost Junk Sickness, and today we're going to be talking about mediums.
Hi, my name is Delphina. I use she, her pronouns, and my comic is Somnambulist.
Hi, I'm Claire. You may also call me Clam. My pronouns are she, her, and I work on the webcomic Phantomarine.
Okay. Hi, I'm Varethane or Allie. My pronouns are she, they, and I make two comics, one of which is Chiralt, and the other one is called Witchwood.
Hello, I am Renie. I use they, she pronouns, and I make the webcomic Cape Blast.
So, today we're going to be talking about mediums. We're in a nice little group full of a bunch of people with a bunch of diverse, different ways and types to go at their webcomics that they create. So, I wanted to start with a question, and that question is, what are the mediums that you chose to work with?
Oh gosh. Okay, so for me, I came at it from a graphic design background. So I've always had Adobe Photoshop, and so when I started my comic, I'm like, okay, I'm going to use Adobe Photoshop, um, and it was fine. It was. It worked for the purposes of learning and stuff. I actually very early on tried to use Adobe Illustrator because I thought, okay, well, if I make all my graphics vector, then I'll be able to make them big for conventions and stuff, and it'll be great. And with this total baby Delphina mindset of your art is going to be something that you want that large because you're just so full of confidence here. Bless your heart. Um, Later I got more experience, and my friend Liz Staley was just talking about Manga Studio all the time, and oh, I love this thing. They asked me to write a book for them. I'm such a fan of Manga Studio, and so I'm like, okay, how good could it be? And they did one of their sales, and I'm like, okay, I can spend $25 or whatever it is on this, and yeah, I really loved it. The pen sensitivity was so much better than Photoshop, and it was really made for comics. So that's kind of where I landed, and I've just kind of been on the Manga Studio, and then later they rebranded to Clip Studio. Train ever since. Hardware wise, I had a friend get me a Wacom Intuos 3 way back in the day. It is held together by tape and a prayer, but it is still working, and I love it. And yeah, I've kind of heard that Wacom tablets have kind of degraded in quality in later models. So I'm hanging on to this for dear life. But yeah, that's what I'm using right now.
Well, if it works, I mean, if it ain't broken, don't fix it.
Exactly. And I really love software wise, I love Clip Studio that it doesn't have a subscription fee like
Mhm.
Photoshop. So that kind of cemented my yeah, I'm good with this. I'm glad that they're prioritizing this, and this is still something that they're working to make affordable and have lots of resources for.
Oh, big agree. Big agree. Claire, same question.
So I had a kind of a similar transition in a different direction. I also started with Photoshop. I did the first two chapters of Phantomarine all in Photoshop. And that took a very, very long time. I kind of assumed that Photoshop was just kind of laggy on its own. And I didn't think that there would be anything that was faster or easier to deal with. And yeah, so I did that for the first two chapters. And then I went to a drawing group with a couple of friends, and I saw them all drawing on iPads. And I was like, oh, what is this? This looks really cool and also way faster and much easier to deal with. The response time is incredible. What is this? And they basically told me everything about Procreate. And I was just like, okay, this is a game changer. This is going to possibly solve all my problems. So I got an iPad in 2018. It's a 10.5-inch iPad Pro. I still have it. I still use it. And I got Procreate, and I've been doing everything on Procreate ever since, except for lettering. I still do my word bubbles and a couple bits of editing and all of my lettering in for Photoshop, unfortunately. I have not made the shift over to Clip Studio, but I really want to eventually. But yeah, I do all of my painting in Procreate, and I have not looked back ever since.
Does Procreate have text tools or?
It does. It's actually pretty darn good. They've got all the basic stuff. I feel like I would need to get a I guess, yeah, a keyboard to be able to do things very quickly, because you're just using your kind of keypad to put in the words. And you certainly can. I see a lot of people that actually do it, but I like being able to go back on my text decisions a lot. So I like going back into Photoshop as much as possible. And I just find it easier. So yeah.
That's incredible, especially to do it so portable too. That's wow. That's phenomenal.
That is a big part of it. I really like being able to go into cafes or into different environments, or even take it to work and do things during lunch. It's really, really nice. And people say that there is a limit to the number of layers you can use, but I don't mind. It's exactly what I need.
Especially with that blend that almost feels like a nice, well, it is a nice blend of that digital and traditional kind of approach. So I think that's marvelous. I totally love the iPad for that. All right, moving down the line, I'm going to ask Thane next.
Oh, I went on a bit of a long journey when it comes to picking a medium. And I guess in a way I never really picked it, because I'd go back to like most of the tools that I've used in the past anytime. When I started doing comics, it was 2006, and I had a tiny little baby Intuos, the postcard sized one. But I didn't really enjoy drawing with it. Like, I would use it to color things, but I was like, I don't think I could draw on it properly. So I would go back to my sketchbooks with like just pencil and paper, and I would do all of my illustrations would start in there, and that was how I kind of started working on comics. I loved how much I could bring it absolutely anywhere, and I could be drawing on like a bus while it was moving, or at the back of a classroom or something, because I was in school at the time. And I The comic that I started doing back then, initially I was kind of coming at it very casually, and I feel like that portability was so important to me, especially at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it took I started having to do gradually, I would work in more and more digital processing into my files later on. Um, I would replace the letters in Photoshop at first. I would just erase out like whatever I had written in with a pen
Oh
and
wow.
type it in.
Oh my
Uh,
goodness.
and initially, I would just flatten those files and save them as JPEGs and not even as PSD, which is a big mistake, and I don't recommend it. Being able to go back and edit things is it's a good thing, actually.
My heart hurts when you
I
said that.
know. I've learned my
Such
lesson.
advantage.
The error of my ways has been shown to me. But I just very gradually started, like, eventually I would also clean up the borders in Photoshop, and then I would save the updated borders so that I could edit them more easily. When I started printing my comics in like 2015, that was when I kind of really had to learn a hard lesson about like making it so that my files could be easily edited later on. And then since then, I guess just more and more of my process started moving to the computer until finally in 2018, I finished that first comic, which was kind of a big part of what was keeping me attached to the sketchbooks all the time, was that I needed to keep that look consistent. So I was always using the same markers and the same pen for everything. The pen I was using, it's the Pentel calligraphy brush pen. It's like a pocket brush, so you can replace the ink cartridges in it like as many times as you want. And At the time when I first got it, I was like, oh my God, it's a brush and it's so expensive. It's hard to control. What am I going to do with it? But I very quickly fell in love because you can get so many different like brush widths just with tiny changes of pressure and stuff like that. And after practicing, it's a lot of fun to use. Uh, anyway, after I finished my first comic, I got a Cintiq monitor, which is kind of one of the big ones. And I feel like the having more space to play around with was really what changed the game for me when it came to doing more work digitally. I didn't really like the small screens of a lot of tablets, and that's why I didn't go in the iPad direction. I had some friends who went that route, but I always find that when I have like the control windows, like the toolbars and whatnot, covering up the art, it
Mm.
really bothers me a
Mm-hmm.
lot. Just on like a, I don't know, subconscious level. So I went the opposite direction and I went bigger, which has been a lot of fun. So my new comic, Witchwood, I do in a combination of Photoshop and Clip Studio. And it's been slowly moving more and more towards Clip Studio because some of those features are real nice for making comics. Yeah, that's where I'm at now.
That's incredible, especially with the shift, like from doing such intense traditional work, working in the sketchbooks, working with those pens, learning the ways of that, and then jumping to, or I guess slowly transitioning, I'm gonna use that word, to like Clip Studio or the digital way. And you use a screen tablet for that as well, eh?
Yeah, that's the big old Cintiq that I got a hold of. It's really like I definitely being able to see what I'm doing on the screen at the same time. It made it feel more like I was still working traditionally, which was really
Mm-hmm.
nice. You get that
Mm-hmm.
kind of immediate feedback. Not that I disliked my Intuos. It's just I don't know. I enjoy drawing more now that I'm working on a screen.
Yeah, it seems like it's just the intuitive like kind of nature of like the growth of the tools for artists is more beautifully like melding together those traditional feelings to make it more natural to actually use. And I mean, like, this is phenomenal that you have these options to do that, especially with Claire talking about switching to the iPad or having those screen monitors and whatnot. I think it's just that's very exciting that these tools are available to us. And I know, as a big fan of such a tool, I'm going to now ask Miss Renie about her mediums that she uses.
Oh gosh. Yeah. A lot of the mediums that I use to make comics has changed as far as like they've been chosen by necessity a lot of the times because for the longest time tried using like an Intuos tablet where you're drawing down but you're looking up and it just that never really worked for me.
Mhm.
And it was always a struggle. So I would be doing this weird combination of doing like pencils traditionally, but also traditional ink scared me at the time much more so than it does now. And so then I would go take the giant 11 by 17 pieces of paper to Staples,
Oh my
scan them at
god.
Staples and their giant printers.
Oh my god.
Bring them
Incredible.
home and then ink them and do everything else with the Intuos. And yeah, then things kind of changed with my day job. And I all of a sudden found myself with a 2 hour each way commute via the commuter rail in Boston, which spending 4 to 5 hours a day commuting was horrible, one, but
Yeah.
two, I was like, this is a lot of time I could be using to work on comics, and
Mm-hmm.
drawing traditionally on a train is horrible. So I ended up splurging at that point and buying an iPad, and the first chapter and a half of Kate Blast was done entirely in Procreate on a train. Because like
Nice.
90% of it was drawn while I was commuting.
Oh, that's
Um,
so cool.
and then I would go, when I got home, I would switch over to Clip Studio and do like the fine tuning, and the lettering. But that commute got way too much for me to handle personally, and I ended up finally moving closer to the city, and all of a sudden I had a 20-minute commute, which was wonderful. Um, and it was around that point that I also switched it and got a screen tablet. I personally use an XP Pen display, because I went for more of a, I want something that's a better bang for my buck than a Wacom,
Mm-hmm.
than a Cintiq, especially with a lot of people saying at the time that the quality was starting to go downhill for what the price tag was. So I was like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
well, let's try a different one. And I've read good reviews on this one, and it's a decent size. I think it's like 16 inches. So it's
Oh, wow.
That is
perfect,
big, yeah.
and that
Mhm.
changed everything about the way I work on the comic. Because I was no longer doing the pencil. I didn't have to do the pencils traditionally and scan them in weird and to make it work the way I wanted to. I could just do everything digital. Um, and I still do, like, all my thumbnails are done traditionally, and like there are certain pencils that I'm like, if I'm struggling with digital on a particular day, I'll pull out the sketchbook and just pencil it out there, and then take a picture with my phone and throw it in there. Um, but I am now pretty much 95% in Clip Studio. Um, and it's going to take a lot to pull me back. Though I've been experimenting more with traditional inks lately and getting more confident with that. So I'm like, who knows what that'll bring in for future comics.
Yeah, I love that. And that's one of the really cool things that I love talking about mediums with artists is that blend, that beautiful blend that people kind of go through stages. Rennie, when you talked about having your thumbnails done traditionally, and then you're doing the rest of the work in Clip Studio, and again, Thane, I know, doing a lot of that traditional stuff, and then going into the programs to finish that. Claire again with the lettering and the Photoshop. It's just it's really really cool to kind of like see a lot of that harmony with all these mediums, and to kind of well, I mean, you can't, but you can get your hands dirty digitally as well as traditionally, just kind of trying a bunch of things. And I think that's like a really really important thing to do, is to just kind of try it out and kind of see what works. As for myself, there are two people that work on Ghost Junk Sickness, my sister and I, and the majority of the work is done in traditional inks. The product that I use is the Micron pens. They're amazing for the quality. The archival part of it is great for storage, and the ink input is pretty top there. As far as the longevity of it, it probably replaced them once every 30 pages, I would say, which is why I actually switched to my new favorite pen, the G-Nib, which is a lifesaver. Sever. It is a pen that you do dip in ink, so you will have to replace the inks that you use, but it is way much longer lasting. It is incredible for the quality, and it is also a pen that is recommended for people who wish to become mangaka. So I do feel 100% cool with that. As well as my other part in my arsenal that I use is the racers, because my sister, who draws the comic, does it in pencils, so I ink on top of it, and we erase away with the mono Tombow erasers, which is great. There's not a lot of dust that comes off of it, and it doesn't lift the inks as much as other erasers do. So I think that it's really good to be picky. It's really good to hear about everybody's kind of like, you know, tools that they use and what they prefer. Delphina talking about having that tablet for so long because it works. I'm like, yes, if it works, hold on to it,
I'm just
especially if
cheap
it's comfortable.
too. I hate spending money. Like the spending money is the worst. So I just if it's working, I will never replace it. And that's why I can't do traditional either because it's just like I have to spend how much for a good pen? Is this going
Oh
to be a
boy.
good pen? I don't know.
Oh, the, since
I
you
will
mentioned,
say that once I did, because when I had the microns, of course, you're right. You do have to spend money. I think you would use the different sizes depending on the line width that you'd have. I guess as a general rule that a lot of people follow in the ink is the finer details of obviously smaller lines. So when you do the face, you would use a 0.005 and then go up from there. So I would probably buy at least, I don't know, a new pen every, I'm going to say 30 pages is when I'd
I'm
have to
taking
replace
notes
that.
now.
Yeah.
Good.
And it is a lot of money. It is a lot of money. You're right. Because these pens can get quite pricey. If you can find them at a sale price, awesome. I always buy them in bulks. So when they come in packs, I find that is a better deal to get them. But like you said, like, you know, it does come down to replacing them and whatnot. Because the number one thing I will say about mediums is don't work with something that's not performing well. That will be very, very frustrating when you're doing your piece and you have this pen that you're just like, I don't want to replace you because you're so expensive, but you're not doing your job right. So it's just like, throw the pen out. If it's fading, throw the pen out. You got to move on. Or if it's a fountain pen, reload. I mean, that's when you're going to start saving money. But my point I was trying to get back to before rambling was when I switched to the G nib and all I have to focus on is buying inkwells, that has saved me a ton of time and money. I don't cycle through as many pens as I used to, hardly any, and I just focus on the ink. But again, I mean, it is expensive regardless of the avenues that you go, and please just choose something that makes most sense to you when you have that as your mediums. And you know, Delphina, that's such a good point about being conscious of reasons as to why you chose your medium. So that's actually a question that I really want to ask the group is why did you choose your medium specifically?
Um, yeah, it was money for me. Like, I would still be on Photoshop if I didn't see like these insane sales from Clip Studio. Because yeah, I just get very stubborn. I came from a house where it's like we keep every pen if it has one breath of life in it. We are keeping this ballpoint pen that we got for free from the car salesman.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
You know, you will breathe some life into this if you have to. And so, like, that really affected me. I'm still working through that. I need like an art therapist or something like that to just tell me it's okay to throw out the pen. It's okay to get a new pen. So I'm really appreciating this, Crispy, because I'm I'm just like, yeah, okay. 30 pages and then I'm done. If it's failing me, then I'm done. Because you're right. It's just so you're already have so many hats and so many jobs to like try to get your rendering correct, try to tell the story that you want to tell, try to get what you want out of your artwork. There's just no time for like second guessing your materials and stuff. So the faster you can kind of experiment, find out what works for you, I think the better off you'll be.
And for me, let's see. I think basically it all comes down to comfort. Because I grew up using Photoshop. I started maybe when I was 10 or so, so I knew it pretty well when I started the comic, which I think I was 25 when I started. So I was out of college for about 5 years before I had started drawing again. And I took a break after college. I didn't draw very much, so my skills really kind of atrophied. And I got to the point where I was like, I want to do something, but I don't know what. and I don't know exactly how. So I kind of fell back on what I was comfortable with. And it came down to, yeah, I wanted to have something where I could edit myself, I could change things, I could go back and, mess up as much as I needed to and make it work for me. And I I also one of my things in college, I majored in fine arts. I ultimately started in the, I guess, general track, and then I started specializing in animation, so things got very clean and very computery very quickly. But I also remember all my traditional classes being extremely messy. I I did not like having a bunch of things all over the place, and I didn't like coming home and washing off oil paints from my hands and being like, what have I done with my life? But
Staring at your hands in the sink.
yes, exactly. And you're
Come
just
off.
like, it's like the out damn spot. It's not leaving. But it ultimately was something where I was just like, I've lost a lot of my skill. I want to build it up again, but I want to be kind to myself, and I want to have everything be um yeah, in one place, I guess. And the expensive stuff, that's definitely a factor. Like, I remember, like, my comic is incredibly blue, and it's like that robin's egg blue. And you go into the fine arts store down the road and you look for that blue, and it is going to be incredibly
Mhm.
expensive.
Mhm.
Oh gosh.
Specifically that blue, it is.
So I'm
I
just
hadn't
like,
even thought of
there's no
that.
way. There's absolutely no way. So I feel like I have the most control with just full digital stuff. I
Mhm.
do know that there have been times where I have drawn a few pages, or at the very least laid out pages, or done poses. Traditionally, if I've been like on a trip or something, I have taken like a sketchbook and I have sketched something out. And I do find that I am way more deliberate when I do traditional work. So I find that my decisions are a bit more careful, and I take more time, and I'm like, oh yes, I am thinking about anatomy very, very carefully here,
Mhm.
versus digital where it's just like, I'll fix it later.
Yeah.
Yay. So it's interesting how the few times that I do go back, I do find me working in digital, purely digitally, it actually does help me learn better, so that when I do go back to traditional work, it I feel like I do get stronger. I don't
Yeah.
do it very often, but I really should. I see
Yeah.
all of you guys doing stuff with inks, and I'm just like, oh, I wish I could, but I'm not brave enough yet.
But that's something that like I hear you go off on a lot, Crispy, about how having the traditional and digital mediums starting to feed each other because they're
Yes.
different skill sets, and like having those like the skills you learn in one impacting the other, and then vice versa.
They do, and it's good. I like that you said that they feed each other because they 100% do. Clam,
Mhm.
you mentioned about being deliberate with your strokes and stuff like that when you draw. And one thing, and I know traditional inking is just, I think that what it's really key to learn from, I mean, guess a majority of traditional art is to work with the mistakes that you make so
Yes.
that you become more powerful and more confident in the line work that you do because working in acrylics has made me paint better and more controlled when I do digital art and same with traditional inking. I feed that into how I even color digitally. So mediums feed each other, and I think that's very important to pay attention to. And one of our little members here who has dabbled very thoroughly in both mediums, Thane, I would like to hear why you chose digital now.
Oh my. There's been a variety of things that I guess have been leading up to it. I sort of feel like a lot of my very first choices in medium were kind of dictated by like happenstance and convenience. Like I also Photoshop was the first program that I used because I my parents had it, so I got to use it when I was younger. And I got started using markers and sketchbooks in the way I did specifically because I was given a hardbound black sketchbook in high school, and I was given like a brush pen that I thought was cool, and then one of my other friends dumped her old markers on me when she didn't want to use them anymore, and I was like, amazing, I must use these forever. So so I started using these things together to kind of make comics, and just was goofing around and having fun, and then just kind of adding in a little bit of like new materials here and there. And I slowly started kind of refining those materials into a set of things that I really liked and could kind of keep working with long term.
Mm-hmm.
Like initially I was using like Letraset Pro markers and the Letraset Tria, back when the Tria were the Pantones. I was using those at first, but those are all disposable markers that you use up and then you have to throw away. And I switched over to Copics specifically because you could refill them, which in turn saved me a lot of money in markers
Mm-hmm.
because they empty out very quickly. But yeah, it was just a lot of like very very slowly kind of incorporating more and more digital stuff into my workflow, and then seeing other artists doing really cool things with their programs and being like, boy, one day I'd love to like be able to do that. Maybe I can just experiment a little next time I'm on the computer and see if I can do this stuff. um, I ended up getting Clip Studio for very similar reasons to I think a lot of people, which is that I saw that it was on sale one day and was like, this will be fun to play with. And I really wanted to start using it for Witchwood when I wanted to start a new comic. I wanted it to be full color, which basically meant it had to be digital, at least as far. I could have done it with markers probably. I had colored markers, but I knew that was going to be significantly more time intensive,
Mm-hmm.
and also way more like materials intensive. So if I was going to do a full color comic, it had to be on the computer. And I was seeing all these really cool things with Clip Studio having these like the paneling tools that would speed things up a lot, and also the lettering tools having the word bubbles that look so clean and neat. Because previously the only way I could figure out how to do word bubbles, if I wasn't just straight up drawing them with a pen, was using Photoshop to kind of blob them in with a brush and then do the like stroke filter. But the Photoshop brush tracking was always kind of blobby. Like, I don't know, it just never quite looked as clean and crisp
Mm-hmm.
as what I was seeing from other artists. So when I discovered that Clip Studio actually had a tool to just make the bubbles, I was like, whoa, I need this.
Mind
So
blown.
yeah,
Such a
pretty
life-saving
much.
tool.
Friendship
It,
over with Photoshop. Best friend
well,
is Clip Studio now.
friendship not fully over with
Oh yeah.
Photoshop. I went to animation school for a year at Sheridan, and in going there, I got access to the full Adobe suite at like an insane student discount. Like I paid like $10 or something
Oh
for
wow.
every Adobe software. And this was before they switched to a subscription model. So I still have that and I'm going to
Yeah.
hang on to it as
Yeah.
long as I possibly can. And like, and I'm also on top of that, I'm still using Photoshop full time for like my day job, my full-time job, working in at a studio. So I'm already like looking at Photoshop for at least 8 hours a day, like 5 days a week, kind of as a baseline. And it's left me feeling still very like comfortable in Photoshop. Like when I open it up, even though Clip Studio's got all these great tools, I still kind of feel sort of at home
Mm-hmm.
in good old Photoshop CS 5.5. Um, I'm like, maybe eventually, like if Windows 11 comes out and my old Photoshop suite doesn't work anymore, I'll switch to like 100% Clip Studio. But I don't know if that's going to be the case. We'll see. I'll find out how long I can keep it.
I mean, again, if it works.
Until the overlords come for your license.
Yeah.
Honest,
Oh
yeah, like
no.
the thing that really makes it for me, like the way that I choose my mediums, I guess, is mostly like, does it feel good to do? Does it,
Mhm.
do I enjoy this? Do I have fun when I'm working in it? Do I feel like I can just focus on the art and not really think about like how much I'm struggling with like whatever tool it is that I'm working with? And
Yeah,
if
That's
it
so
needs that,
important.
I'm happy.
it is important. It is 100% important. I mean, Delphina said perfectly with the fact that we wear so many hats as webcomic creators, and to be finicky with the medium that creates them is just no, go with what you feel is the best for you and enjoy that process because oh
Mm-hmm.
boy, it's a long one.
Yeah, I know for me, I'm kind of the odd one out in this room as like I didn't have like any kind of traditional art or design or graphic or anything kind of upbringing. I went to school for engineering to do pipeline design. So
That's a kind of
it's
design.
Yeah.
a kind of design, but it's not art related. But I was always like making like doing like the TV and art stuff and growing up, and I was like, oh, I want to do this. So I got my mom at the time was getting her master's in something that allowed her to get a student discount for her for Photoshop CS2. Um, so I used that and then transferred it to my university ID, and like I kept that like as running as long as I could. And I just always did digital art because growing up, like the traditional media art mediums were always super intimidating to me, and
Mhm.
like, and they were until fairly recently. Which I'm like, just get messy, just do it, just get
Mhm.
over it. But I got really into digital art mostly around like 2004 2005 because of DeviantArt, and I was like, look at all this cool stuff they're able to do, this is awesome, I want to do that.
Mhm.
So I've been digital ham the entire time, just trying to find ways to make it work. I actually didn't have a drawing tablet until 2015, and before then it was all just using a mouse and doing like
The classic.
doing, yeah,
Wow.
and just doing, okay, everything's vector, I'm doing, okay, gotta move this pen curve over
Oh
here.
my goodness.
It was so tedious and so horrible that it's no wonder I only ever completed one actual comic page before 2014.
Oh my gosh.
It was
Step up from
horrible.
trackpad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought about it, but it's like because I was just so I was very cheap, and I was like, can I justify $100 for just me drawing stuff for DeviantArt? I don't know. Um, and especially like there was about a 5 6 year period where I didn't draw anything outside of like sketchbooks and just like side doodles, for a lot of personal reasons. But when I got really back into drawing again in 2014 2015, the first thing I did was I went and got an Intuos, and I was like, okay, if I'm going back to digital art, I'm doing it correctly. Um, but so for me, it was like digital was always just the standard because it was accessible to me as someone who just wanted to make Sonic OCs back in the day.
Live your
Valid.
truth.
Like everyone else. Don't deny it. But yeah, so it's just like one of those things that just always it felt natural to me to just do digital, and I just really loved like anything digital art related, and it's just obsessed.
I yeah, totally agree. I guess it goes back to me kind of understanding why we chose the medium that we did. Working as a duo doing Ghost Junk, Laura and I have been traditional artists for the longest time. I guess a common theme in this chat is cutting down costs because art to
Hmm.
produce it is extremely expensive. A lot of our work in our former years was done in Crayola crayon pencils, the colored pencils. Oh, yeah.
Aw.
And I mean, we got crazy skilled at that for what they were, using the techniques that you would read the DeviantArt tutorials with, blending the color white to make those ombres and stuff like that, and to make it look like painting. So it was one of my favorite tools, or I should say mediums that I've used. I look very fondly on it. And as I grew along, Inks became very important because of us getting very inspired by manga and that being predominantly black and white. And because the times we had, access to ballpoint pens and stuff like that, that you could get in those nice little back to school packs and kind of hoard them and feel like you're a real mangaka. And that's definitely where my love for inks kind of came from. It was just that messy approach. It was, kind of playing around with mistakes. If I made something that, did have a big enough mistake, here comes the whiteout, here comes, I guess, the acrylic paint or whatever to kind of cover it up, and then just kind of work from there. And I really liked getting messy and I guess feeling quote unquote authentic um, to my aspirations of being a manga artist. So that's just something that is just core to me. It is my favorite medium, and I thought, well, if it's the favorite medium, why not do a comic with that and enjoy the process like 100% of the way. And I think that that's just something to embrace, especially with webcomics. Again, the amount of hats that you wear, and the process being as long as it is. Like, have fun, fall in love with the process. If there's something that you're really, really good at, if you are extremely passionate about using colored pencils away. Like, go for that.
Yeah. So, like, when you're looking at all these mediums, and there's just so many different options you can go with, like, how would you recommend to someone who doesn't seem to know how to pick their medium? Like, a lot of starting artists are trying to figure, oh, there's where do I start? Where did they start? Um, what would you say to someone like that?
Well, for me, working from a digital perspective, there's a lot of different comic making programs out there. The thing you want to look for is the ability to handle large files at print resolution, so like 300 dpi in case you ever want to print your comics. Um, Layer functionality is really handy because keeping your art and your panels and your text separate and editable is important. um, Connectivity with pressure sensitive tablet hardware, or if you're working like on an on-screen tablet, something that works with
Mhm.
that. Not every program does. Just compatibility with your system, whatever that is. um, and I would also say, if you're just starting out, look for programs that have an active user base that are invested in making tutorials on
Yeah.
YouTube or something, because you can go it alone, you can figure it out, and sometimes that is really fun. But if you're struggling with learning how to do something, there's so many resources nowadays, and the more popular a program is, the more resources you have from the community when you get stuck. So I mean, a lot of us have talked about Clip Studio. It's often on sale for like $40 or something like that. I definitely recommend that. Procreate has also been mentioned, is wonderful as an iPad only sort of situation. Um, a lot of people swear by Paint Tool
Mhm.
Sci. I don't think it has text functionality. Um, so you would need another program anyway, but I hear the tools are very good for that. Krita and Medibang Paint, those are both free. So if cost is like I can absolutely spend no money, those are good options for you. And then Adobe Photoshop, elephant in the room, it's like $10 a month or something now. If you can get it at a student discount or through work or something like that, maybe that's a good option for you. But it's the oldest, the most established art program out there. The PSD file format is pretty standard. A lot of brushes and resources have been developed for it over the years. So it's there. You can use it. But yeah, it does come with that nasty
Mhm.
subscription fee now. So any way you can like mitigate that, especially when you're starting out and you're not sure if you're going to do like a Patreon or how things are going to take off for you. Like maybe not that, unless you can get it for
Mm-hmm.
free.
So yeah, for me, I know that when I was choosing what I wanted to use, I always knew I wanted to go digitally, but I also didn't want to abandon things that I had learned traditionally. I feel like a lot of what I do in my comic is it's kind of similar to pushing around paint. I feel like I did a lot of oil painting in college, and I feel like a lot of that kind of comes through in what I do. Even in Procreate, I like putting color down and I like spreading it around kind of more than actually using it like a pen. So I think there's a lot to be said for people, like, even if you do want to start out with something digitally, or you think that it's going to save you lots of time and money in the long run. I do think that there is something to be said for like try
Mm-hmm.
traditional things. You know, if you want to jump right into comic making, I think you can go traditionally, absolutely. But I think there's a lot to be said for trying other things, seeing what you learn from those media, and it might even come back into your own work. I know that I'm not a fan of that kind of standard like airbrushed look in comics where you put down the solid flat colors and then you just use your big airbrush and you put a highlight here and you put a shadow here and it's like a perfect gradient. I'm like, no, I want it to have some textures. I want it to have kind of this feeling like somebody's worked with it. You can see the hand
Mm-hmm.
making the thing. And that was always very important to me. So I have I encourage people to use digital media whenever they can. But I think there's a lot that I learned from traditional stuff as well. So even if you aren't going to use it to make a comic, because making a comic is so much more than just I'm going to draw a person, I'm going to draw a dog. Like you're putting pages together, you're putting layouts together, you're doing so many things. But if you experiment on the side, I know it would come back into your
Mm-hmm.
actual comic work.
Yeah,
So
I think that's
yeah.
very, very important. I think, like, at the bottom line of talking about mediums is that, I mean, you could say that you're going to be like, oh, I've never done art before, and I'm therefore going to dive in a certain medium, and maybe it won't jive with you, maybe it will, and you'll never know which one is your favorite until you get in there and just play around at the speed of sound. There's a lot of experimenting that you're going to be doing and a lot of making mistakes along the way that is going to happen with that.
Yeah, these are all like super good points that are that have been made in here already. So I'm running out of things that I was gonna say. But I think the point about experimenting is one of the most important things for people who are just getting started in comics or just in art in general. And one of the nice things about traditional tools is that they tend to be some of the first things that are very accessible to anybody. Like you can just grab like a Bic pen or like the pen that the car salesman gave you, and
Not
it
that
might
one.
have
No,
like
I
a pretty.
can't remember.
I've gotten
Put that
some
one
good
back.
pens, okay, from the floor. A lot of the very first like art materials that I ever got were like just stuff that I
Oh, hey,
randomly
sweet floor
found or
pen.
like freebies that would be given away. And you might start using it and discover like, wow, this actually rolls a pretty nice line on like just a sheet of like crummy
Mm-hmm.
printer cartridge paper. And I've spent a lot of time just like playing around with tools like that. A little bit of extra backstory. I worked for a while at a daycare for about 5 years with kids age 6 to 12. So I was spending a lot of time around the type of materials that these places tend to have, which is a lot of, Crayola markers and like the cheapest possible of paper and like pencils that have been donated and stuff like that. And you can actually do
Mm-hmm.
quite a bit of like fun stuff with materials like that if you just kind of give them a little bit of time and play around. And you never know when you might find something that actually clicks with
Mm-hmm.
you really well, that you find that you enjoy much more than you thought you did. And like I've gone through a lot of materials that like I would wholeheartedly like endorse and recommend to anybody. Like I love my Pentel brush pen with the pocket nib and everything. And I've also there are materials that by the time I was at the end of Tiralt, I'd been working on it for 11 years, and I had this like finely honed pipeline of materials that I was using, and I had a favorite eraser that I was getting from jet pens. It was actually also the Tombow mono erasers that Krispy was talking about, because they're incredible. But it was like I got a whole bunch of different types of erasers, and I was testing to like figure out the best one. Ein dust collecting erasers, also a shout out to those and to jet pens in general. But like, you don't have to start with the fanciest of imported erasers when you're just at the experimenting stage. Like if you find one and it works fine for like experimenting and trials and stuff like that, you just use it. There's no there's no shame in it. Like try what feels good. Get something a little nicer when you think that it's time. Or if you have an opportunity to grab something nice right away, like definitely go for it. But just have fun, spend some time playing around.
The having fun part is like the really the other key here, because it's like if you get so hung up on like having it be, oh, this has to be perfect the first time around, or like, oh, I have to, if I pick up this medium, if I'm not immediately good at it, it's trash.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta just let go of things and have fun with it. And that's something that I would tell my younger self, to just go and like just have fun with it and don't worry about like whether or not it looks good. Just experiment and have fun with it.
Yeah.
That's such
That
a
is something that's something that I literally told to the kids at work all the time, because sometimes you'd get a kid who had seen real art supplies at some point, and they'd look at the Crayola markers that we had collected there, and they'd be like, ugh,
Yeah.
those are for kids. And I'd sit down and I'd take it as a challenge. Like,
That was
okay,
me.
let's see what we can do
That's
with
so
these.
good though. Funny about that though, it's such a good point, because you don't need the highest quality to make incredible art. I mean, for my watercolors, which is another favorite medium of mine, I still use and stand by my pack of praying watercolors for kids that I have made some of my more like giant pieces with, because the colors are vibrant that you can't get on some of the more higher end stuff. I mean, like, it's more complicated 100% in the traditional world with what you can and can't use to showcase in galleries and stuff like that. That's a whole other discussion. But as far as trying mediums, you don't need the best of the best. I had actually, before, it was my last year in college, my professor of mixed media has this huge studio in a barn, and I was asked to go and clean it out with my sister and another friend. And we went through loads and loads of her art throughout the years, which is an incredible experience. Her main medium was encaustic. So seeing her do these 12-foot canvases mainly using encaustic was insane. But at the end, as payment, she actually gave us a lot of her art supplies. So I was given these cans filled with everything. I have drawn with eyeliners that are 30 years old because it feels so good to just have a bunch of random stuff. It's like 30-year-old eyeliner, this weird, I don't even know what it's made out of, pen, this weird tube, like, that's unlabeled, I mean, don't go for stuff that's unlabeled now, but
Oh, Paris green.
Oh boy.
I mean,
Hey, what does lead mean?
it was a little tricky in school. We had to make our own medium, and one of them exploded on a person. So it's just like, whoa, you gotta be, woo!
Oh,
Please be safe.
Don't try this at home, kids.
Yeah, but also do try out different mediums. Like I said, the eyeliner was eye-opening. Haha! trying and just playing with these random mediums really helps you understand, I think, one of the most important parts of being an artist, and that is how you hold your arm and your pressure to work with the tools that you have, and how you hold yourself will determine actually what medium you kind of like go to. I'm not going to sit here and be like, if you're heavy handed, you're going to go for that. No, it's all completely like, it's individual, and you're gonna experience your favorite medium when you try it out, and when you learn to kind of just, I don't know, love it. But you won't get there unless you experiment. So please go wild, touch all the things, but be safe.
Yeah, that actually reminds me of a course that I took in college. It was just one of the like, oh, you're an art major, you have to take some random art classes, and I took this illustration techniques um, class that like took you through inks and colored pencils and gouache and watercolor and oil and just like one piece in each of those things. And it was just it's absolutely true. You start like figuring out, this definitely works for
Mhm.
me, this does not work for me, I will never touch this again. And but just spending a semester doing that taught me so
Mhm.
much about like, just the like additive mediums versus I don't really remember the language, but like the stuff where you have to kind of add things and subtract things, and I'm rambling,
A
I know.
reductive?
Yeah, but like, so oil, you put down a layer and then you put down another layer and you're mushing things together, but gouache you can't
Mhm.
do
Yes.
that.
Yes.
Yeah, like watercolor is completely different. Just all these different methodologies for dealing with different
Mhm.
mediums. So if there's like a community college course or something in your area and you learn that way, like sometimes that's a good thing too. Just to have an instructor just give you the basics of like, this is how you use gouache. Don't try to use it like
Yes.
oil. They're different things. And that'll cause like yeah, just having things on my table, like I would have a thing, but I didn't have the technique for it yet. And I would just grind down colored pencils because I didn't know how to like hold them nicely. And they would just look like crayons or something like that. So for me, especially just having an instructor saying, taking 5 seconds to say, just consider
Yeah.
doing this, helped me a lot. To make me feel like I wasn't wasting my
Mhm.
money.
Mm.
Mhm.
And like I like you had a great point there with the community college thing. I was like, as someone who did not go to art school, like a lot of the stuff I learned was after the fact, after school, like while I'm working full time, and a lot of the classes at local like community colleges, or I'm blessed to live in Boston where we have the Museum of Fine Arts, which offers tons of classes for adults, and like take advantage of whatever resources you have, or like sometimes they'll do classes at your local library, or like, or hell, even don't poo poo paint night, because like even though that's like just like a place for single moms to go get drunk on wine, it's a place for you to mess around with acrylics at zero pressure. So just
Whatever you do is going to be better than the drunk mom.
exactly. So just like be like like art school is great, but if you didn't go to art school, that's fine too. There's tons of other places you can go to learn, or like especially for digital art too. Lots of local libraries offer like passes to like lynda.com, or I think it's like LinkedIn or whatever it's called. Lots of different online learnings, not sponsored. Um, that that you can go and get free passes to, and take some free online classes that are, or there's even some paid ones that you can learn a lot from.
There's also a thriving genre of artists on like
Yes.
YouTube and probably other
Twitch.
places like Twitch as well, who record like their whole process. There are some really popular ones working in watercolors specifically, but I'm sure there's other mediums where if you search it there, you can watch an artist going through their whole entire process, like from start to finish, and talking about it kind of as they go. I can see if I can gather up some links after this and see if we can find any
Oh
channels
yes,
we all
I
like.
think that would be great. We can definitely talk about mediums forever. That's the thing about choosing about mediums. I think the biggest thing that you want to pay attention to is the fact that the world is actually your oyster. There's a lot of accessibility to learn and to learn from others, to create with others, that you do have access to. Delphina has named off quite a few awesome free programs to use if you're really into digital, and even the majority of us talking about the fact that you can use any traditional media. It doesn't need to be that super expensive, oh my goodness, brand when you want to try something. I say just, if you're passionate about something, you can spend less on it, try it out. And if it's something that really, really resonates with you, I say stick with that. Stick with that, and that will definitely make the process of creating your webcomic all the more better in the end.
So make mistakes, get messy.
Is that? Well, I thought there was 3 lines.
There were. I can't remember the other one. I've been trying to remember it all night. Somebody quote Miss Crystal for us.
It's make mistakes, get ready to... Okay, it is take chances, make mistakes, and get messy. That's what it was. Wise words indeed. So I would definitely encourage you all to take chances, make mistakes, and get messy.
Thank you so much for listening to Screen Tones. Please subscribe to us on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to also follow us on Twitter at ScreenTonesCast.